All right, welcome everybody. Glad you joined us. Before we get started, I will just tell you, I think that chat is your friend. So be sure and open up your chat, and you could tell us who you are or where you are or where you heard about this webinar. We would love to know that. Well, it is 7:02, and let's just get started with some of the preliminaries here. My name's Cindy Shepard. I'm going to be welcoming everybody and talking during the panel discussion later on. Welcome. We are so glad that you're here for our webinar, Plastic Free July. July has been plastic free, and we've all been trying, I know. So we're going to talk now at the end about getting real about what being plastic free might mean for us. We are hosted tonight by myself and Christina Krost, and our co-host for the evening is the Congregation Or Shalom from Lake County, and we have John Katz-Mariani as also a member of our panel, and we are very pleased to have tonight Jaclyn Wegner from the Shedd Aquarium. As you know, the Shedd is a leader in protecting aquatic environments and aquatic life forms. And so they've been also a leader in dealing with the impact of plastic and the threat that poses. So we welcome Jaclyn and the Shedd Aquarium to our seminar tonight. Christina Krost is our policy coordinator for Faith in Place and Faith in Place Action Fund, and I am the Central Illinois Outreach Director, and we chose the funniest pictures that we could find of ourselves. I love my glamour shot with my electric car. We're glad to be here tonight. And next slide says, we do have kind of a big crowd tonight. For us, this is a large turnout, and so we are in a meeting on Zoom, so please, we ask that you all mute yourselves while other folks are talking. When you have questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we have folks, including myself, watching the chat, and we'll pick up on those questions that you have. You're invited to click on the blue rectangle up by your name on the Zoom, and you can add your preferred pronouns there if you would like. We're just really, really glad that you are here with us tonight and are looking forward to visiting with you. We want to tell you a little bit about Faith in Place, and instead of slapping our mission statement up on the screen, we have a 1-minute video to show you that has our mission statement in it and some great music. So Katie, hit it. So fun. Thanks, Katie. We do work with diverse communities of faith all across the state, and we have several regional locations all the way from Lake County and our Chicago office, which is where we started and where we have the largest number of folks working. But I'm here in Central Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, as is Christina Krost. We have an office in the north and west suburbs as well. I don't want to forget that, certainly not. And recently we have a southern Illinois office that is in Marion, Illinois. So we truly do span the state and look forward to working with folks everywhere. I thanks to all of you who put your location in the chat. If you haven't done that yet, I'd invite you to do that just as a way to say hi. Where are you located? Where are you located? No matter where you're from, we're really glad that you're here with us tonight. And I want to give you a short rundown of what to expect in the next 45 minutes to an hour. This meeting is part of a series of Let's Find Climate Solutions. And tonight we're going to talk about the problem with plastic. We're going to introduce you to our waste toolkit and then hear about the wonderful work that the Shedd Aquarium and Jaclyn are doing in their Let's Shed Plastic initiative. Then we plan to have 15 to 20 minutes of room for discussion and questions from you. And we want to hear from you and your concerns, and then give you a chance to make a commitment to take some action to address the problems that we are addressing tonight. I'm going to turn the mic over to Christina Krost and let her get started. Christina?
All right, good, I'm unmuted. Hello, good morning. Good morning, good evening, everyone. It's been a long day. Good to be with you this evening. So I'd like to start by talking about, first of all, who is responsible for all this plastic pollution? And as you can see here on the graphic, everyone is pointing fingers at someone else. And that is kind of part of the problem. Companies try to make it sound as if consumers and governments should really be the ones to behave responsibly and protect the environment. It's not their job. And then governments, when forced to enforce regulation on these corporations that are completely polluting our environment, really don't feel great about doing that because jobs or because, you know, economy. And then consumers get angry with the government for not doing what the government needs to do to help enforce these regulations. But we as consumers have some agency here for change. And so though we know that we cannot solve this problem by ourselves, let's take the agency that we do have, learn about it, do something with it, and then talk about the other steps, getting corporations and governments to do what they're supposed to do. Let's go to the next slide. So this is a great video that highlights what the problems with plastics are. Plastic is a real problem for a lot of different reasons, up to and including fossil fuel extraction, which is something that maybe we forget about in this process. And so let's start there. Let's start at the beginning, get a little bit of background on the problems with plastic, and then we'll go from there. So Katie? Thank you, Katie, for sharing that with us. So I hope that that wasn't entirely jarring to you, or that that wasn't all kinds of new information to you. But fossil fuel corporations are not our friend. They come into our communities and they promise us jobs, but they do harm, much harm, not just to our communities right where the extraction might be taking place, but all over throughout the entire cycle of this process. And as we try to transition ourselves to a more green, clean, renewable energy-based economy, this is why we have to be ever vigilant that fossil fuel extraction is not allowed to ramp up, because it will be ramping up to create more plastic. So something to be watchful for. And you can do some of that watching. Can you go back one more real quick? Something to be watchful for is at this oil and gas threat map. So you can type in your address, and Carla just put the link to this in the chat. This is really eye-opening. You can kind of see the outline of Illinois in the slide here, that there are a lot of places in Illinois that are extracting oil and gas, and places that you wouldn't necessarily think. And so this can help us as we are trying to figure out perhaps why some of our loved ones might be having breathing difficulties or things like that. You might be able to pinpoint it to there's oil and gas extraction happening in your neighborhood. As a mom who has a child with respiratory difficulties, this does impact my family. And so I do pay attention to this map, but I also pay attention to how many days of school that my child misses due to these respiratory difficulties, and how many doctor's visits that I have to take her on, and how vigilant I need to be to make sure that that little wheeze doesn't turn into pneumonia. And so this is something that we can use to kind of pay attention to what's going on in our communities, but also to see what's happening, to our other brothers and sisters around the state. So I'd encourage you to check that out, because you would be very surprised at how close there might be a oil or gas well to where you are living right now. All right, next slide. And so as people of faith and justice, we want justice-based solutions to the waste crisis. And so as Pope Francis has put, so eloquently here, we've got multiple crises happening at the same time, social and environmental. And so we have to pay attention to the poor and to the earth crying out that we need solutions for both. So again, as people of faith and action, hopefully, we can see that this waste problem is a justice issue. And so we are called to act here. This little graphic here shows that roughly the United States represents about 4% of the global population, but we generate 12% of the, of municipal solid waste globally. So if you look at who we're competing with, China and India, and what their population numbers are like, it's ridiculous that we have this much waste in a country that has so much fewer, or so many, so fewer people. That's a fairness issue. That's a justice issue. And we cannot expect our garbage to go to the rest of the world. So we have a consumption problem that we need to confront here. So a waste hierarchy here, where it's more circular and where putting things in a landfill is removed from the equation, or hopefully greatly diminished, is really what we're going for here. And so this is just kind of an example of what that new waste hierarchy could look like. And you see here several R words like refuse, reduce, reuse, regift, repair, repurpose. You see recycle in there as well, recover. When we were kids and learning about the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle, we didn't hear about all these other ones. And so we need to start adding some more R words to our vocabulary. Let's go to the next one. So in the chat, I'm curious, what, if anything, is your house of worship doing to reduce waste? And I wanted to highlight this part of house of worship because I know a lot of us personally in our own homes might really be doing a lot of things about waste. But we're here to talk, I think, at maybe a little higher level than just personal today. I want to hear what your house of worship is doing to reduce waste. And that may really vary depending on where you live in the state of Illinois. I live in East Central Illinois, and about 3 weeks ago, saw in the newspaper, didn't even get an alert or any kind of information from the city itself. They've just suspended our recycling program. There is nowhere to take my recyclables in my county right now at a municipal level. There are some small little organizations that take some recyclables, but the robust recycling program we had disappeared overnight and has not returned. So as a house of worship, or as the wife of a clergy person, that makes me think, is there something that our house of worship can do to help with that, or not, or direct people in different places to get their recyclables taken? So I'd like to know in the chat, what is your house of worship doing right now to reduce waste? And it's okay if you say nothing. It's also okay because many of us may not be worshiping back in our buildings yet. And so you can maybe tell me what you were doing prior to the pandemic, or maybe what you plan on doing when you return. But I'd love to see in the chat what you say. So I'm seeing, recycling bins in classrooms. I'm seeing people bringing their own things to worship, like a cup or a cloth or something like that. Houses of worship that have stopped using disposables. That's like the easiest place to start, I think. Compost bin, that's great. Using real plates and real silverware rather than disposables. Very good. So that's a good place to start. And I would suspect that's where a lot of us maybe are starting as well. Why don't we go to the next slide real quick? So a few years back, certainly before the pandemic, don't ask me what year, I wrote this waste toolkit for Faith in Place to try to give houses of worship a place to start. And I mean, full disclosure, I could not have possibly implemented about even a third of the things that I wrote about in this waste toolkit in the church that my husband was serving at the time. So I know how hard it is. I know firsthand how hard it is. So inside this waste toolkit, which can be found, Carla put that link in the chat where you can find that on our website, free to download. You know, we'd encourage you to use it and share it. Kind of gets at, do we have a waste crisis in the United States? So doing some education for folks. What can people of faith do about it? Talking about the 3 R's and then adding a few more R's on there. Talking about some successes that our green teams have had, and then giving you some action steps. So this might be something that you could look over in a Sunday school classroom, or something you could look over at a small group that you might have, or some kind of study group. It would be fairly brief. You could cover a chapter a week or more. They're fairly short. And go over it together and then see what you can do together. All right, so here are really quickly some examples of some successes that houses of worship that I'm familiar with have used. So to reduce, the Church of the Good Shepherd in Carbondale hands out reusable straws. They keep them on a table at their welcome table. When you first walk in, they have their names printed on, or the church name printed on it. So you always know where the straw came from. And it's just a really good signal to people who might be visiting, or people who are longtime members, that we have normalized in that house of worship trying to reduce waste. Another way that houses of worship can address waste is to reuse things. There are lots of churches and schools and all kinds of different houses of worship that host rummage sales. That could also be an easy fundraiser for your green team. You know, you could charge a few dollars at the door and then, you know, collect all of that and then let people take whatever it is that they need. That's also a economic justice thing to do, where people aren't having to pay individually for items, but a flat, you know, fee at the door. And if they can haul it, they can have it. So lots of ways that houses of worship could get involved in reuse. And then we'll talk really quick about recycling. So the Interfaith Green Partners in Arlington Heights have made it a habit to have their float at the very end of their parade, and they collect whatever recyclables they can from along the road and along the people that are lining the road, so that some of that waste is diverted from a landfill. And again, it's a great way to show very publicly people of faith care about this and are willing to do a little bit of extra work to make it happen. One more suggestion, you might want to take a little field trip, maybe with your green team, maybe with whomever in your house of worship is interested. Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, all of those different groups might be interested in this. Take a trip to your local recycling center. See where it happens, see what happens to your waste after you take it to the curb or put it in your recycling bin. And it's a really eye-opening experience, certainly, to see how much of it really is just kind of stored, as the economics of recycling is a very big piece of recycling in general. And zero waste is another thing that kind of is a buzzword and gets a lot of attention, but zero waste would be not producing any waste at an event, trying to keep that loop, again, completely closed and not diverting anything to a landfill. So an example here is some Muslim brothers and sisters at the Chicago Muslims group at the Downtown Islamic Center had a zero waste iftar. This was a couple of years back, but they were able to divert 45.7 pounds of waste from a landfill by being really clear and having very trained helpers to make sure that everything went smoothly, and very clear signage about, where this goes and where that goes, and, where you are to take this and bring this with you, and all of those things. So it can be done with volunteers, and that's a great opportunity for your green team to step up. And kind of closing out what it is that I wanted to say this evening about waste and about houses of worship and what they should be doing. We don't need everyone doing this perfectly. I think that's unrealistic, but we do need everybody trying. I know that seems to focus all of what we can do with waste on individual consumers, and that's just not true. We know that corporations should be responsible. We know our governments should hold those corporations responsible, but we are people of faith, and we know what we can do, what we have the power to do together. And so let's all try to pick something that we can do and do it together, imperfectly, but consistently. And now we are going to hear from Jaclyn Wegner, who is the Director of Conservation Action at Shedd Aquarium. And she's going to tell us a little bit more about what's going on at Shedd Aquarium related to plastic. And we're delighted to have her tonight.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Christina. Thanks for the introduction and for all of the great information that you've shared so far. I am really honored to be here today. I appreciate Faith and Place inviting me to come speak to you all. And I'm already inspired by all of the folks adding things in the chat about ways that your house of worship is reducing plastic use. And I also just really like the framing of today's event. How do we get real about going plastic free? So I'm happy to share a bit about Shedd Aquarium's work. I'm going to keep it a little bit high level, but we'll also point you to some resources. I think, between Christina and me and other speakers today, you're going to have lots of action steps. And I really love that sentiment of, we do not need perfection, but we need progress. So we need everybody to be part of this. So wherever you are in your plastic-free journey, we are here to jump in with you. So let's get started. Okay. So a little rundown of what I'm going to discuss today, the evolving dialogue around plastic pollution. We are wrapping up Plastic Free July and hopefully moving into a plastic free future. So we'll kind of talk about where we are in the world with a plastic free future ahead of us, and some ways that you can start small and amp up from there. Okay, so evolving the dialogue. I want to start with this because even that story of plastic video kind of references some of the environmental impacts that we've been told over time about how animals are impacted by plastic pollution, which is true. But I think today's discussion, today's webinar, and really where the public dialogue is going around plastic pollution has been really shifting in a very exciting way, I think. So I'm going to share maybe some of our kind of traditional statistics and how we've looked at plastic pollution, and talk about how the work around this issue is changing. So we know that there's a problem with plastic. Some of you may have heard this statistic that's been kind of going around the last few years, that by the year 2030, there will be more plastic than fish by weight in the ocean. Kind of blows my mind. It is hard to wrap your head around that, but thinking about more plastic than fish in a natural environment is certainly something that we need to kind of, wake up to. Looking locally, every year, about 22 million pounds of plastic are entering the Great Lakes, and about half of that, 11 million pounds of plastic, enter Lake Michigan. And I'll talk a little bit about how plastic is also, of course, in our rivers and our streams and our ponds. It's kind of everywhere that scientists are looking for it. And as was mentioned earlier, recycling is not our solution. We're not able to capture all of the plastic that's being produced, and less than 10% of the plastic ever produced is actually being recycled. So that means that 90% is ending up in the environment, in landfills, or being incinerated, which is also a concern for our environment as well. So we know that plastic is ending up in our waterways. It is impacting wildlife. Even thinking locally, any fish or other animals that scientists are actually dissecting and checking out gut contents, we're finding plastic in their system. It can cause starvation because if an animal has a stomach full of plastic, they stop eating natural food and can starve to death. They can become entangled. And again, the video earlier referenced that sea turtle that was kind of a poster child for plastic pollution that had a straw that went up its nose. Scientists think that it tried to eat it, and then it kind of ended up in its nasal cavity. Plastic is also entering our systems. And we know that locally, 12 out of 12 Great Lakes beers that were tested had microplastics in them. So even for something that's like processed like a beer, is still ending up with plastic in it somehow. So we know that plastic is a problem downstream, but part of the conversation and part of what we want to talk about with this dialogue evolving is that plastic is an issue upstream as well, both in production as well as while we're using it. And I'll talk about that more in just a bit. So a little bit more about what the problem looks like and locally, and thinking about not just that it's an ocean problem or a lake problem, but it also is present in our waterways like the Chicago River. And we have a program called Kayak for Conservation where we bring people out to explore the Chicago River, do some wildlife monitoring, but we also do some litter removal. And we document what we find, and we give that data to Loyola University in Chicago. And so we're trying to better understand where is this litter collecting, where is it coming from, and what types of items are we finding? And so just to kind of point out a couple of things in this graph, on the left-hand side, the bottom blue pieces are showing the pieces of litter that are collected that are plastic. So it's definitely a large portion. And actually the orange right above that is polystyrene or styrofoam, which is actually an expanded type of plastic. So the great majority of what we're finding in the river is plastic. Over on the right-hand side, the orange boxes that we're seeing are from food packaging or something that clearly is associated with food. And then all of that yellow are fragments, like things that are breaking down and we cannot quite identify what it is. And so we're trying to better understand what is ending up in our waterways, because we need to move upstream, not literally in the river move upstream, but move upstream in our waste management or in our consumer behaviors or in our kind of societal practices to figure out how we can cut off the source. The big thing here is that we are not going to be able to continue to keep up with, clearly ages ago, we've fallen behind. Cleanups are not the solution. So even though, we absolutely encourage people to get out and do coastal cleanups, we want to make cleanups a thing of the past, ideally. And I am seeing this bar at the top of my screen. I hope you guys aren't seeing it, but if somebody sees that and it's in the way, let me know. Let me hide. Nope, that didn't help. But anyway, so I've mentioned a couple times, and this has come up earlier today as well, that plastic is not just harmful to animals. It is harmful at every point of its life cycle. It's harmful during the production when we have fossil fuel processing and pollutants entering our communities. Plastic is also harmful while we use it. Things like styrofoam and plastic for our especially hot foods are leaching toxins into our food, and then we're consuming those things. And then of course, downstream in the waste stream and in our environment. And so I wanted to actually plug a book by somebody who I've met recently named Sasha Adkins, who is a professor at Loyola University. And they wrote this book, From Disposable Culture to Disposable People. And I just picked it up recently to kind of learn a little bit more about how plastic is harmful at all these stages of the life cycle. So just wanted to recommend that if you're interested in checking it out. So again, this evolving dialogue, so getting away from just worrying about fish and sea turtles, and that's me coming from the Shedd Aquarium saying, we should absolutely understand how wildlife is impacted, but we need to better understand this problem more holistically. One way that we are doing that is also by bringing in different voices and perspectives into the movement to move away from plastic. And Shedd was part of a national coalition that was organizing an event that happened just last week, just that I wanted to mention to this group. The group was hosting a panel discussion for Latino Conservation Week. And these were a couple of the images that they were using to promote the event. But the whole essence of it was that zero waste is not new. We need to build in more of the traditional ways of being, looking back to what our grandparents did, looking back at what other cultures do to build zero waste into our lifestyle. Sustainability does not need to be something that is expensive or challenging to achieve. We need to figure out how we can make it an equitable and accessible thing for all of us. So building in discussions that allow us to explore what other cultures think about zero waste or how to go plastic free is a really valuable thing for us to do. So that's really been something that I'm excited about on that kind of national or even global scale with the movement around plastic pollution that I would love for us to continue to do more of in Chicago and in Illinois, and really bringing different folks into this conversation. I think Faith in Place is always so good at doing that. And this community and those of you on here today, I expect that and trust that it's part of your way of doing business as well as fostering those diverse perspectives. So to move on, we're wrapping up Plastic Free July, and this has been a month-long opportunity to raise awareness and advocate for going plastic free. Shedd Aquarium hosted a number of webinars, and I mentioned the one with Latino Conservation Week last week, and it has been just a great opportunity to kind of get a surge to raise awareness about not just reducing plastic or recycling plastic, but actually going plastic free. And with the title of today's webinar being Getting Real About Going Plastic Free, I was trying to wrap my head around, like, how do we talk about this? This is, we need to take baby steps. How do we head towards a plastic free future? I wanted to share, I had dropped something in the chat earlier from an organization called Upstream. And they also, a few weeks ago, came out with a report called Reuse Wins. And wanted to just share how they're looking really holistically at all of the different costs that are associated with plastic waste and production. And, sometimes we think plastic's such a cheap, affordable, accessible material, but we pay for it in a lot of different ways, including those things like removal and needing to deal with it on the back end. But so the Reuse Wins report is really looking at the business and economic benefits of reuse, the health benefits of reuse, and the environmental benefits of reuse. So I wanted to just share this graphic. I'm not going to kind of break it down entirely, but just wanted to reference it that we can envision a reuse economy, especially thinking of food service, which is one of the biggest culprits for plastic production. Certainly a lot of industries are contributing, but just wanted to kind of share this visual. And I have another thing to reference from Reuse Wins. They actually break down some of the science for us so that we can understand, using 500 paper cups consumes nearly 370 gallons of water, but just using and washing one ceramic cup 500 times consumes only 53 gallons of water. When we start wrapping our head around what one ceramic cup can do compared to 500 paper cups, this is really where we can see the benefits continue to amplify over time. So it does take all of us kind of thinking a little bit more systemically and working along with industry and policymakers to think about how we can work towards reuse. And there are certainly challenges to it, but I think the more we dig into and understand the benefits, we can work together to get to that place. And then finally, I'm going to just share a few kind of opportunities to take action. But one of my biggest themes is that each of our individual actions absolutely matters, but there are also always things that you can do with those actions to amp them up or to level them up. So, really we can continue to start small, but then find ways to have ripple effects. Just wanted to reference that we have a bunch of information on our website, sheddaquarium.org/plastic. And these are, some of the ways that folks can start to get involved. But I'm going to kind of do a deeper dive into some of these as well. But just want to reference that we've got some great resources on our website, joining an action day beach cleanup, contacting a congressperson, downloading our action guide, are a few things that are on our website. So I'm going to share a few slides that all kind of have the same format, where it's like there's one good deed that you can do, and then there's a way to level up that good deed and kind of go beyond just that one action. I imagine, and I saw this in the chat a little bit earlier, a lot of folks are moving towards using reusables in their daily life. So our reusable coffee mugs, reusable bags, all sorts of great things for us to use and reuse. But there are a couple ways that you can have ripple effects with that. Start by telling your friends and family about how and why you're using and promoting reusables. There's a lot of power in building community around these issues. And the more we talk about it, I know I learned so much from people around me about new solutions that they've come up with. And I can also just, me bringing it up is a way of making it a priority for others and showing that it's something that I care about and I want to see the people around me doing more of. We also have an opportunity for you to sign the Reopen with Reuse petition, and I can share this in the chat in a little bit. But this is a national campaign urging restaurants and venues to bring reusables back as they open their operations, as we're still kind of in COVID and figuring out our operations that are constantly evolving. But there are some resources to better understand the safety of reusables, even during the pandemic. And COVID is, it can get washed away and killed in regular dishwashing the way any other virus or bacteria would be impacted. So bringing reusables back throughout our food service is a great way to level up that action. Another good deed is to vote with your dollar. So support businesses that are reducing their plastic use. I have over on the right side a number of our Let's Shed Plastic restaurants that have all committed to reducing their use of plastic. So a restaurant joins our Let's Shed Plastic initiative. They receive resources for reducing plastic, as well as kind of a community of their peers who they can ask questions, share testimonials, and just connect and feel empowered. So we have over, I think, close to 160 restaurants. They're all listed on our website if you're interested in voting with your dollar to visit any of them. But I also have on the kind of level up here, you are more than welcome to nominate a Let's Shed Plastic restaurant, and also be sure to give them a shout out on social media or with an online review to celebrate their move towards reducing plastic. Just wanted to kind of reference our website here. If you are a restaurant or if you know a restaurant, they can sign up on their own to join the Let's Shed Plastic initiative. It's free, low barrier to entry, and we'll meet restaurants wherever they are in their plastic-free journey. And then also on our website, you can nominate a restaurant. It does not need to be in the Chicago area, and we've had restaurants from around the Midwest join, but we are definitely concentrating in our region so that we can kind of build power with the community of change makers that we're recruiting to this program. And then I think this is my last one good deed, step up in your community. And this is such a great opportunity, especially for those of you involved in your house of worship. And you already shared some of the ways that you're reducing waste within your operations. But some other things you can do, of course, to host a zero waste event. I've got a little typo there, sorry about that. Organize a beach cleanup, establish a neighborhood compost program. But then again, how can we level up from there even within these systems? We can raise our voice in support of policies, such as the Federal Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. And this act was introduced a couple months ago and is still being promoted and being considered by Congress. So I invite you to write to Congress, let them know that you are interested in supporting the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. This again is a more holistic legislation than many have seen before. So we're phasing out throwaway plastics made from fossil fuels, holding the plastic industry responsible for its waste, which is a pretty new thing for us to have in federal legislation to be introduced, and pause construction on any new plastic making plants. I'm kind of just going to speed through this as sort of like a summary and just kind of mentioning, I gave all these ways that we can act individually and ramp up. And all of these things are ways that we can work individually, work in our communities, work on removal and reduction. And all of these things are going to be necessary. We're going to have to come at plastic pollution from every angle. Plastic pollution is not just a problem anymore. It really is a crisis, and we need to treat it as such. So to put all of our strengths and resources into understanding and tackling it is kind of the path ahead for us. So with that, cheers to our plastic-free future. And I know we're going to be doing some Q&A. So I'm just dropping my email address here if you want to take note of that, but we'll also stop sharing my screen here in just a second.
Thank you so much, Jaclyn. That was really interesting, and lots of good ways to amp up our individual actions. At Faith in Place, sometimes we talk about the individual actions as a sort of spiritual practices that we do because they shape our own lives and shape our priorities and perspectives. But it is important for us to remember that acting with our institutions and especially policymakers is really where this crisis is going to have to be resolved. So we have some time for some panel discussion and questions from our guests. I'd love to see what you would like to know from our speakers tonight. Again, I'd welcome to the panel John Katz-Mariani, who's from Congregation Or Shalom. And John, I've got a question for you. What are some ways that your congregation has been dealing with plastic waste, and what has worked for you and what maybe has been a challenge?
Well, I think I'll turn that question around a little bit and just start with the challenge, which is that people are really busy and people have habits and lifestyles, and Or Shalom is largely made up of 2-parent families. Both parents are working and raising children. And so breaking into those sort of habits and those patterns of behavior, I think a lot of people are doing that, but there's still some work to do. So the first way that we've been attempting to break through to that is to connect our institutional values to the benefits of reducing plastic waste. And you can do that in your house of worship. You can also do that at your company or where your workplace, your corporation. And so for us, these are Jewish values. So we believe we're all made in the image of God. We have to treat our neighbor as ourselves, and that neighbor can live next door to us, or that neighbor can live halfway across the globe. So these things are important to us. We partner with God to try to repair the world. I think that another thing that we've tried to do is to provide cost-effective alternatives in terms of like products and experiences. So we did some fundraising, and we've purchased a bunch of compostable products that we're going to be able to, after services, we have a little food and drink, and we're going to be able to do that in a kind of a zero waste way. And we just did that by fundraising. And we did a lot of consciousness raising, awareness raising through a lot of events that I think, people can do. Like we did an Earth Day event. We did a movie, Story of Plastic discussion. We've done environmentally themed religious services 2 years running now. And one thing that we think is really important is to involve children in this. They are the future, and their voices are extremely powerful. And I've noticed when kids talk, adults listen. They respect that and want to really pay attention in order to sort of reward that courage that children are showing. And so they did participate in our environmentally themed services, and we've done some events around the kids in the school. And I think getting this into the school is a very important thing in terms of like curriculum and activities, just to raise awareness and get kids involved. So that's kind of what's been going on at Or Shalom. Oh, you're muted.
That's my favorite trick. Thanks. Thanks for sharing that. Wonderful initiatives. And I especially do want to applaud you for involving and including and letting the young people help lead the way. I think you're onto something there. That's terrific. There's another question. This one's for Jaclyn from Amy. She asks, what is the community like that the Let's Shed Plastics restaurants have? How do they communicate, and do they share information and their successes and failures with one another?
Yeah, so when a restaurant joins Let's Shed Plastic, they get a digital toolkit with resources. There are some like how-tos, like ways to reduce plastic within your operations. We provide some case studies of other restaurants that have reduced plastic, as well as some tools for them to be able to communicate with their staff and their customers. One thing that we've heard from our restaurant partners is that they are sometimes more ready than we think to reduce plastic, but they think that their customers want something different. So for example, with cutlery, when we were talking with a couple of restaurants earlier this year, they were like, we don't want to give them cutlery, but we've sometimes skipped doing that. And then we get a call that somebody's upset that they didn't get their cutlery. Since then, we've been working with some of the delivery platforms, and there's been a little movement where now you do have to opt in if you want cutlery. I don't know if folks have started to see that shift, but it's kind of this play between restaurant, delivery platform, public. And so Shedd is trying to find ways that we can kind of play a middleman, like help the restaurant find ways to be sustainable, but also do public education so that customers will understand that if they're not getting cutlery, that's a good thing. It's something that they should celebrate. So through all of this, we have that toolkit, and we also provide invitations to our virtual events. A lot of the ones that we've been hosting over the last month, especially, are publicly available as well, but we invite our restaurants to join. And we also provide opportunities for them to celebrate and brag about ways that they're going sustainable or plastic free. A week ago, we had a lunchtime webinar, and we invited a few of our restaurants to come talk about successes that they've had. So a great opportunity to promote them and get them in front of different audiences and help get more customers to visit them.
That is cool. Celebration is one of our big green team rules with Faith in Place. Celebration builds momentum for the next step that you need to take. Thank you for sharing that. I had a question for any or all of our panel, and that is, I recently heard that in Maine, the state of Maine, there was legislation passed that would make the industry that used plastic in their packaging and so on responsible for paying for recycling it. Is that kind of the idea behind the Beyond Plastics at the federal level, or is that something that we could do here in Illinois? I'll put our policy person on the spot.
Yeah, Christina, I wonder if, Christina, do you want to take that one? I'm also not a policy expert, but I know that that's part of what was included in the Break Free legislation. It's
cool.
Folks will start throwing around this term extended producer responsibility, EPR. And I think that's maybe what that Maine legislation is doing for their state. I think we are maybe a couple steps away for Illinois. I don't know how close we are because we have some other smaller steps I think that we need to take before we get there.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. I think that's pretty accurate. And I'm not aware of anything happening at the state level right now that would be like that. But I did drop in the chat the Senate and the House related bills and what representatives of Illinois, you can search by, are supporting it. So, if we can get at the federal level, Illinois on a path to, or the country on a path to breaking free from plastic, we can certainly have those representatives then maybe come and talk to our state representatives and say, hey, this is how we implement in Illinois. So hopeful.
Thank you. Thanks. Before we go any further, there's been so much great information shared in the chat, and I want to let all our participants know that you can save the chat so that you can look at those links later. And the way you do that is by moving your cursor down in the chat box down to the bottom where you would be writing, over to the far right where there are 3 little dots, And if you click on that, a menu drops down that says Save Chat, and just click on Save Chat, and then you will have all of those wonderful links and resources available. So I encourage you to do that. Encourage you to do that. We'll also be sending you a follow-up email, which will have some of this information in it and a link to the recording that has been made tonight. Let me look and see any more things in the chat. Oh, John says that they met with their congressman to advocate for him sponsoring that Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. Good for you. If anyone on this call would like to get a group together and talk to your legislator or policymaker, your Green Team coach or Christina from the policy side of Faith in Place can help you get prepared for that, organize it, and make it happen. It can be a very, very rewarding experience. Are there other questions that we want to get? We're getting close to our time, and I want to be sure to let you go on time, but not before I thank you all again for coming, and thank our panelists and presenters and helpers behind the scene. Jaclyn, it's been fabulous to have you here and to hear about all that Shedd is doing to protect those beautiful aquatic animals, one of my favorite places to visit when I'm in Chicago. Christina, thank you, and John and all your fellows from Congregation Or Shalom. It's been great to have you here. Carla Aldana, who is our Lake County outreach staff, and Katie Maxwell on tech here tonight have been terrific. So thanks so much. Before you leave, I encourage you to open that chat one more time and type in one way that you are going to work to reduce plastic consumption for you, for your community, or through advocacy. Just encourage you to go ahead and use that chat box like a little pledge card, like a little note to yourself to remind you. I believe that social scientists have found that we are 4 times as likely to do something if we write it down. So use this as a way to strengthen your own resolve to make a more beautiful plastic-free future. Thank you, thank you. Oh, there's good questions in the chat that we're not going to get to. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you for your questions and your engagement tonight. There are some good ideas in the chat. Christina, you want to tell us how to take action through Faith in Place and Shedd's initiative? Oh, she's
sorry,
still.
lost my cursor. Okay, I found it though. Two screens. Yes, we would love for you to talk to your legislators to support clean energy legislation, which is climate legislation, which is, you know, all related to fossil-free Illinois, which is related to plastics. So these things all work together. So that's me with my daughter, Madeline. She's 16, she has asthma, and she's had a really hard time these last couple of weeks because of the poor air quality from the wildfires out west, and just because of fossil fuel extraction right here in Mattoon, just making, you know, the humid, nasty weather is really impacting her. And so for us, it's a matter of health. And we are trying to tell our legislators, who are very unfriendly to this kind of legislation, but we're still out there talking to them, sending them petitions and saying, please help build a fossil-free Illinois. And so that's a photo petition there. We put it on social media. We tag our legislators. We can even tag Faith in Place or the Action Fund so they can amplify it as well. And, you know, when you see someone do that, you think, well, gee, I could do that too. And then hopefully we get more people doing that.
I already plugged the Let's Shed Plastic program, but please feel free to push or point restaurants our direction so we can help them out.
Terrific. Next slide. yes, we just want to remind you that you can connect with us on social media at Faith in Place and at our website. We want to invite you all to set aside time in September. It's in the middle of High Holy Days, so that hopefully it doesn't conflict with any of the big festivals, but or observances. But it's September 12th through 14th. We're going to be getting together for a virtual time of Rooted for Healing, learning and gathering. So encourage you to be part of that. You can also contact Christina or me at our email address. And we just want to thank you all for joining. It's been really wonderful, and it fills me with hope to see so many people who are acting and thinking and caring to make a better world. It's really terrific. And together, I believe that we can get there. So thank you for joining us, and keep up the great work.